So do you guys have something similar to that as well?
Yeah, I don't have it at the moment, but I was looking at exactly that, and I was actually taking from hold on a sec, let me just get this right, the Kirkpatrick evaluation model that is used for training effectiveness. And I was looking at the 3 levels and seeing if it couldn't be adapted here, or the 4 levels, sorry. So the first level is around NPS scores, right? It's like you're saying, sentiment scores, seeing how they're feeling on different parts. And this can be done, as soon as you finish any type of project or change or whatever. Then there's a second level. This one I'm not sure how to adapt, but it's around a quiz, right? So you actually ask a quiz to see what did they extract from that process, right? Did they learn anything? Did they evolve in that sense? Then you start measuring the behavior. And this is done more in a 3 to 6 month period. You start seeing if their behavior is changing, if there's a model change. And then the last one is around the actual reaction, and that's the impact around the company. And so you start looking at, is the product org changing because of what you've done, right? Can you start seeing that? And so it goes almost from a quantitative to qualitative, but it sort of gives you the step ladder. And I've been trying to look at how I can adapt this maybe to this model. So that's what I'm looking at the moment. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a really important aspect of when we think about these systems, and I had a very visceral reaction to the post that was on PLA about like Taylorism and product operations. So I may or may not.
Kudos to Bruno, ex-colleague.
Yeah. Yes.
Great article. I love that.
I am maybe or maybe not writing a response to that article because of the idea of Taylorism makes me like this, like it made me angry, first of all, to hear the word Taylorism used with product operations. But again, like I have the utmost respect for every product ops person out there. So I will figure out how to navigate this in a way that is interesting and helpful. But yeah, I think like this idea of, are we talking about it as a system that can be established and the rules are known, right? Or are we talking about a system that is highly complex, that involves lots of different types of organizations inside of our organization? And I think it's more the latter than the former, but I think there's room for both of those things, right? Like, and this is maybe something I've been thinking about, the difference between just like project management and product management is this idea of product management being a lot about embracing the uncertainty of the world, whereas project management is about how do you build safe environments for software development, right? And those are 2 very different things that need to happen. And so, I don't know, it's interesting because then in the product ops world, the way I've usually approached this is like, when I first got to Cognizant, it was starting to map out all of the different cause and effects that we're starting to see that are in some way impacting each other and creating kind of loops or flywheels. And so the biggest problem for us was, we were being put on projects that were not ideal for product managers. They were more like Scrum Masters or user story writers or horrible titles like that inside of clients. We were not getting the bill rates that we wanted. People were not getting trained up to the levels that we thought they should be. And so there was like inconsistency in leveling, things like that, right? And so all of these things end up being interconnected. And it's not like I can institute one policy as a product ops person that will just fix all that stuff. Or even multiple policies, right? And I don't even know what would be a policy I could implement that would fix all those things, right? And so it's more about this idea of like, from a complex adaptive system thinking point of view, is this idea of interventions inside of the systems or probes or, and when I say probe, I mean from the standpoint of like Cynefin, like Dave Snowden complexity theory, is that you're like making small interventions into the system to see whether it improves a little bit. And those things all snowball together to become better and better overall. And so that's I think this idea of like, what are the things that we need to make safe, right? So when I say safe, like we need to check the boxes that like legal was talked to before this thing was released, right? Versus this idea of like, well, we want to have as much kind of ability to be resilient and robust and adaptive of these teams. And so, maybe a good example of this is that whenever I've read through all of these like handbooks or playbooks for product management, there's usually one page that talks about communication, right? And that communication is like, we do it this way, the SLA is this, we use Slack for these things, we use email for these things, blah, 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 right? And what I saw when I came into this community was that there wasn't really an issue about communication. Like there were a few ways that we communicated as a community, but it was kind of known. And then for the most part, people were on client teams. And so it was whatever those client teams wanted to do as far as communication. So actually writing some type of process around what are our standards for communication didn't make sense because it wasn't going to help anybody. It was just going to create more process for the process sake. And so I think that's where I'm coming from when it comes to a lot of this stuff too, is like, how do we understand or at least start to map out this complex system, which involves all of the people that both of you are talking about, right? It involves all these partner teams, it involves all of these different groups. And so, I mean, that's why that Venn diagram of like product management is always like the least helpful Venn diagram now. And I hate the fact that whenever someone creates a new role, they create a new Venn diagram. It's like the worst way to explain what you're doing is a Venn diagram. And so like it's actually many different things when it comes to product management. But the reality is like every other role too, because every other role in a cross-functional team is working together, right? And so that's why I just think like it's maybe an unhelpful simplification of what we do. But it is about like dealing, not only like working with and stewarding the community of practice for product managers, but it's now making sure that there's not frictions or problems with other people. And that could be both from the standpoint of embracing uncertainty, as well as building better, safer systems as well. So.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Where when you really think about it, every function today, regardless of sales, marketing, product engineering, there are hugely cross-functional and lots of communication and collaboration across and within and up and down, right? So, and every function, the Venn diagram really is just you have a ball with everything interconnected. You just turn to the ones that your viewpoint, and then you think it's go out. But for the other person, look at a different side of the same connected ball, and that person's viewpoints connect out. I think that totally is really where it's interesting, where a lot of people tend to think that if I'm a product manager, I'm a more sort of collaborative. But if you think about the same as the sales, like sales can't sell anything if it's not there. They don't have a like same as the marketing. Like every function is, and the product obviously is also very cross-functional.